Welcome back folks and welcome to Arrakis. As the title says, I had the incredible opportunity to play Dune Awakening closed test for the past week and a half, and so far I got about 25 plus hours overall, which was as expected because keep in mind we didn't get the entire game unlocked, so you could still easily get about 30 to 40 hours in this just of the content we actually had available. So today I will go through my first impressions as I have positives as well as negatives to say about this experience. But overall my time on Arrakis was well spent as I fought scavengers and bandits while avoiding Shai Hulud or well the Sandworm, while trying to find the best way to, or well point, to cross the desert. For those who don't know, Dune Awakening is developed by Funcom, which you probably know already from Age of Conan, Conan Exiles and so on, because when I heard that there is a survival Dune game coming out, I kept my eye on the development, so it's really nice I actually got to test this as well to remove some of my fears I actually had around this title. As I already mentioned, this is first and foremost a survival game, so as any survival you will be collecting resources around the map, mostly mining and cutting down scrap metal, so you can build yourself a shelter and within it, other tools which will help you craft even more stuff. By claiming your territory and making a base, you will have to construct a generator to keep other machines running as well as secure your base from other threats and degradation. Then you have to go out, collect raw resources which are basically changed into ingots and other useful materials within your base and those machines. But this is not all you have to think about, as this is Arrakis, water will be the most important resource you can get. So for you, you will use blood extractor to well extract blood from other enemies you down, so that means NPCs you find around each area of the map, from smaller camps to bigger camps which contain better loot which you will need to get. Besides that, we have locations like shipwreckages and testing stations which also serve as a bigger dungeon, especially a testing station that has, well, resources you cannot find anywhere else. Testing stations also are quite longer because they have boss rooms which lock you in until you defeat the boss or clear the room. And also you're going to be venturing throughout the world exploring, because there you can find blueprints that are basically like unique pieces of like let's say weapons and armor and so on, which you cannot really research yourself, and they're going to have certain things like bonuses which will be very useful for you, so exploration is rewarded. Now speaking of research, usually as it is in survival games, as you do stuff and research recipes and for example things you can unlock, you unlock more and more. Now in the case of Dune, as you level up you get research points. Those points are used to make better stuff or well research, better equipment which you can make, and honestly it's not that hard as those research points can be found even in some locations through the world, but also keep in mind in those enemy camps, once you take that research you cannot take it again, but at the same time just leveling up, doing anything in the game is going to give you those research points. And honestly I never felt like I was lacking enough of those research points because you just go out, level up a bit, and that's pretty much all. Besides that, you have skills, which means abilities you can use that can go from bombs to various other abilities which you can select through a certain class which you're gonna be playing. Keep in mind when it comes to classes, technically you can go and start researching other classes as well, but you can never become the master of everything, so you cannot have every single point unlocked even with the max level, as it was actually stated by the developers in their livestream. Besides that, you have techniques to elevate those abilities and passives which work all the time and give you better stats for, let's say, slower weapon degradation, better water discipline, and so on. Now keep in mind that the main 4 starting classes are Trooper, Menant, Bene Gesserit Acolyte, and Sword Master. I took the Trooper class as I get to use the hook and shoot rockets, which is fine by me. We will get into combat itself later on though. Going back to the map itself, as you see, this part of Arrakis is separated into zones. So first zone will give you resources until certain level, meaning that once you start researching different tiers or stronger tiers, you need better resources to craft that gear. So you move into a higher tier zone. Pretty straightforward, so don't get attached to the first base too much. I mean, you won't spend much time there because you will have to travel north, and basically you are not gonna be going back and forth because there is no no reason, and every single time you do, you're going to have, well, the threat of having the sandworm pretty much destroy you. Each zone is similar, although of course there are some differences. For example, let's say that the heat rises as you go into higher tier zones, so you have to research better armor because otherwise it's not going to save you all that much. But everything else, like in different, like those tier zones, you will have, you know, fight NPCs, have wreckages, testing stations, and so on. So those things are going to stay kind of similar. Besides that, each area has a trading hub where you can, you know, get contracts that unlock you weapon blueprints, give you money and other resources. Plus, they are very useful as you also meet different houses. So Atreides and Harkonnen as main ones, but you also meet others as well throughout the game. Moving on the map takes some planning, as you have to find the shortest gaps between these rocky areas, because if you just go and stroll around, the sandworm will just get you. So going from one zone to another can be very fun but frustrating experience, as you have to reach it but also look out for the worm. And keep in mind, you can do some technicalities with it, like once the game comes out, like you can have some people lure the worm while you cross, or maybe get some resources through without, you know, having an extra danger. Doubling back to water and white matters, well, it's pretty straightforward, but the sun is rough on Arrakis, so during the day you have to stick to shadows, because if you stay out for too long in the open, you can basically get sunburns and start losing water fast, as you are evaporating basically. So I usually move during the night as it's the best, and leave daytime for crafting and building, although you can of course move throughout the world during the day, it's not going to be an issue, but just keep out for like the water, you know, going out. Now to get water there are a few ways. First off, you can drink from some of these flowers and plants which you find in the area, but they only restore like 1 bar. Later on you will get a tool which you can take water from, like those plants, and fill it up. But for the rest, you basically have to extract blood from enemies, you purify it into water, and then plus use that water to craft stuff as well, because basically some of that stuff, like iron, let's say later on, you will need water with other materials. So it's going to be constant back and forth, purify and then do that. But as any survival, later on you unlock wind farms which are going to collect water, so the process can be a bit more doing stuff for you rather you constantly doing it, but that's going to be somewhat mid-game to end-game. So gameplay loop is gathering resources, moving on to bigger tiers by also building different vehicles, going all the way to ornithopters. So you can really build you know, big things and move up in like better armor pieces as well as weapons, since you need resources and only higher tier parts of the map is actually going to have them. On the armor side, you have regular low defense armor, but it gives you better, you know, environmental protection, but not so much on like, you know, against weapons and so on. And heavy armor, which has more defense, which actually I use for the fight. So if you're gonna be moving into any areas where you're gonna be fighting a lot of enemies, I don't recommend using a still suit to go with it. But for exploration though, I use still suits as they are the best. I mean, plus you can get some water back, which you don't with other stuff, you know. But you can also, as I said, bring water with you in that case. But in general, having a still suit, it's better because it has better environmental protection and it's so much better, you know, just to explore with it. The only downside is that, again, defense with still suits is not really the greatest. Regarding story, I won't go too far into details, but it's there, as you find out basically right at the start that you need to find the Fremen. You know, some things happen, you end up there, and now you need to find these ancient temples to inhale spice. Trip out and find Fremen and also, you know, get some lore. Lore-wise, it's definitely interesting, as I think Funcom is doing it really well. You can definitely see that the latest Villeneuve films were an inspiration in how the game in Arrakis feels, which is a good thing. I mean, they managed to really mimic that feeling of being on this desolate, dangerous planet which doesn't care about you. When it comes to combat in Dune Awakening comes in 2 segments. Ranged weapons that, well, you will use throughout most of the fights, ranging from medium range, semi-autos, full auto SMGs, shotguns and stuff like that. As expected, of course, they also come in different tiers. But since this is Dune, melee combat is important because when you move away from the first part of the map, enemies get shields, and those shields function in a way to stop anything fast, but only a slow blade or, well, slow movement can go through them, so the attack with the blade slowly is the only way to defeat them. And you will use that shield as well, of course, because It lasts as long as your battery does, because the battery pack in your inventory is going to do everything from the actual abilities you can use, techniques, and then of course using the shield. When it drains, you're pretty much screwed, but of course when it replenishes, you can do it all over again. The replenishing time is not going to be an issue, like it's instant, so that's not the problem. The only issue you might have is the degradation of the item, which basically, as everything else, degrades in your inventory. But fighting multiple enemies with blades takes a while to get used to, as they can be tough. I mean, they will parry you, initiate abilities, defend, and the usual. So when 3 or more bladed enemies attack you, it can get hectic fast, as animation movement can get all over the place. I mean, this is one of the parts of the game which definitely needs some tweaks in that department. I mean, it's not too frustrating, although it can be once you get around it, but it can be just better and smoother. Because every time you want to attack and you're being chased by multiple enemies, there is going to be some soft lock-on when you try to attack. So when I want to attack someone on the right, it goes to the left, and even in the settings I was playing around and I couldn't figure it out. It must be kinda just in-game. So that was basically the problem which I had. Because I feel like this jank with melee combat, especially when you combine it with enemy AI, can be kinda problematic, especially if we're talking higher difficulties. Although, if you are downed in this game, you lose some of the items from your backpack, nothing too crazy, which you can go back to if you go and pick up your backpack. Now, the bigger problem here is if you get eaten by the sandworm. In that case, all of the items which you had are lost, and there is no way, at least which I've seen, that you can retrieve them. There are different types of enemies, so as I said, ones that use blades, ones that only use weapons, heavy enemies that have machine guns, and those need special care, because basically if you go in and they start shooting at you, that's the only time you can actually attack them, or well, wait for them to shoot, start reloading, and then start shooting. But then the problem is they have the shield on, so you have to use the blade. But don't worry, because those camps throughout the map respawn all the time, so farming stuff is not that difficult. I mean, in general, I felt like there isn't really too much of a grind which you have to do, for example, for certain things. Most of the stuff which I was actually getting, like resources, I can do in 1 to 2 runs, which basically allows you to focus on everything else like exploration, because you can find most of that stuff anyway. So what about PvP and PvE? Well, throughout the map itself, the regular one, it's mostly PvE zones, so you don't have to worry about constantly being attacked or ganked by others. So like, you can think of the map as the PvE zone, but you can have wreckages, like as I talked about, which is a PvP area. So once you get close to it, it's going to change the zone and you're going to be in the PvP zone, which means other players can attack you and you can attack other players if they are near. So that's where you collect some of the items which you will need, but you don't have to, because you can get those items from the trading hubs. Although, honestly, I was going through those wreckages all the time, even though, you know, considering that this was a closed test, I wasn't really seeing a lot of people there at that time. But of course, in the open world, next to trader zones, I was actually seeing other people. So yes, you can definitely see other people throughout the game as they do other stuff, but you cannot really fight in those areas. Because the only full PvP area in this game is the deep desert, but you're not going to reach deep desert until like maybe 60-70 hours in the game, maybe less though, and only then you're actually gonna be going in those areas to like meet other people maybe, but everything else, I mean, it's not going to like set you back all the time. So you don't have to worry about people camping in front of your like base or something like that, because it's not going to be that kind of a game. Dune has that social aspect which can really be something special if you end up playing with good people or just have interesting players on the server, so you can basically set up your own trading post and whatever. I mean, just the sky's the limit. Base building consists of claiming the land and setting up the foundation, walls and roof for basic protection, which is waterproof, so you don't have to worry about losing hydration when you are in your base. It also provides protection against these storms which might hit the sector, but if you are actually in your base, it's not going to be an issue, and for as long as you're sheltered somewhere throughout the world, you're going to be safe from that storm. But of course, in your base you have to put down the generator that you will fill with batteries you scavenge around. Honestly, as I said, I really didn't have an issue finding those batteries, so my generator was running for like 17 days after like maybe 20 minutes of exploration. But later on, as you get more machinery, you're going to have to construct more generators or better ones to actually supply, more electricity. And as you're progressing throughout the game, you're gonna be able to claim bigger land than at the start. So if you see, like, for example, the size of your base at start, later on you're gonna be making foundations, which is going to expand that. Graphics wise, overall I think it looks good, at least when it comes to, painting Arrakis and showing how harsh it can be. I mean, in general, just the color palette and just the vibe I got from this game was actually quite nice. Of course, there are some things which might be kinda low texture, I don't know, maybe it's just that because we were not playing the finished product yet. So there were some things which I felt like had some low textures, but everything else, like for example designs of stuff, of the base, like the textures on it, the weapons, the armor, it was all really high quality and really looking good overall with the entire aesthetic of the game. And music goes along perfectly with the entire vibe, so there is really nothing bad for me to say about it. I mean, the music is probably one of the strongest parts of the game, like it's really, really well done, especially once you're going throughout the desert, once you're fighting, like the music can really add up to that. Framerate wise, keep in mind that this is early version, so I didn't go into full benchmarks yet, but on my 3070 Ti and 5800X in 1440p it ran well, although there were some issues. In places where there are a lot of bases, especially if you're going close to a trading hub, it can definitely stutter and the frame rate can drop a lot. Then when I was in some places like wreckages for example, I noticed some drops here and there. That stutter and maybe those drops are going to happen for let's say 10-15 seconds and then they go away. I think a lot of that might have to do with obviously the server, how it's loading, so there is definitely some triggering which can happen with it, but I didn't know how other people, how it's running for them because this was a closed test, so a lot of that is going to crystallize once this game comes out. But it's also weird when you drive a vehicle, for example, because it seems when you're doing some actions, it feels like in lower frame rate than the rest. I mean, that also might be something on the server side. As far as glitches, problems and bugs go, I mean, I generally had a smooth experience, although I had some problems. For example, where I had some enemies that I fought that just couldn't do damage to, like, at all, and they were able to do damage to me. Now that happened 3 times in some smaller bases where basically they were normal enemies, so nothing special, you didn't have to do any trickery to damage them, just normal enemies, and I couldn't do any damage to them at all. Also, from time to time, I noticed that my scanner just wouldn't scan and I didn't want to do anything, so I had to basically reload the game. I exited the main menu and then I rejoined the server, which can be okay if it's in a safe spot, but if you're somewhere where it's problematic, it might be an issue, because it also happened one time where I couldn't get my weapons out at all. I mean, you hear the animation that you took out the weapon, but I think the server didn't recognize it. So again, I had to reload the server itself, or well, go out and in for it to be fixed. The rest though, I mean, there might be of course some bugs here and there which happened, but in general it was a smooth experience. I wasn't having disconnects, I wasn't having issues, but keep in mind, when it comes to that experience, it's most likely going to be, well, potentially different once it's on full release, because you have everyone joining in. The main question for the end though, did I like it and was it fun? Being that, as I said, I like Dune, from somewhat that lore and immersion standpoint, I think it's very strong, especially because it's not Rust style PvP where you have to build fast, watch everywhere you go, but rather focusing on exploration and PvE with PvP, certain zones, and then obviously if you're going to go into deep desert, that's going to be that full-on PvP, which is technically endgame. I mean, running from the sandworms, having anxiety every time I was crossing an open desert was definitely a cool experience, and it's hard to describe, but you're going to see it. Gameplay loop I think is okay. I mean, it's kind of a general survival style, build, loot, create items, research better ones, and move into a better zone. Simple as that. I think if you end up on a good server, I think the social side can be fun as well, as you can team up with people, they gave you enough toys in game, like ornithopters, I think, for you to want to advance further and kind of do some cool stuff. Can you solo it though? Well, I played all of this time alone and didn't really run into any problems or issues where I just couldn't do something alone. I mean, keep in mind that obviously this is with not everything unlocked, so I don't know how the solo experience is going to be in like late mid-game to end-game stuff. Obviously, If you're thinking deep desert, I'm pretty sure that you can move with like more people in it and have advantage, but if you've been playing these sort of games, like you can have one person go into something like that and basically take out a lot of people out. So we shall see how that endgame stuff is going to work, but so far, at least to the point that I played, like I really didn't have to team up with anyone to do anything. Overall, I think that Dune Awakening is something you should keep an eye out on. The budget side, it feels like it's definitely good. Plus, developers promised, as they said, no pay-to-win mechanics, rather most of the stuff will be, cosmetic. So think base designs, armor designs, swatches and paints on those armor pieces, like vehicles and so on. Keep in mind that this is also not a review, so these were kinda my first impressions, and they're pretty much solid. I mean, it can definitely expand further. They can polish stuff up, like definitely combat, which can be problematic and probably one of the things which people will have to get used to. And I wonder in PvP like how it's going to look, because with these closed servers the situation is different. And that's all for today. I mean, big thanks to Funcom for giving me access to this. I mean, I only followed this briefly, like during development, but as it was getting closer, I got more interested in it and just having this opportunity to play this. So if you enjoyed this video and want to see more Dune Awakening content, don't forget to subscribe. And also let me know down below what do you think about everything which you have seen in this video, and will you be actually going into it. Also join our community on Twitter and Discord, and huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters. And I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye bye.